A map drawn in smoke. The smoke rose slowly from the small fire, twisting and curling into shapes that seemed almost alive. Alara watched the patterns with quiet fascination. Each wisp of smoke was like a line on a map, invisible to most eyes, but clear to those who had learned to read the language of patience and observation. Every ember leaves a trail, she whispered. Not of ashes or fire, but of memory and care. And every trail tells a story, if you know how to see it. Her apprentices gathered around, their faces illuminated by the soft glow. They had traveled far to learn from the last ember, yet this lesson felt different. It was no longer about tending a flame or carrying light, it was about following the paths it left behind, understanding the connections between people, places, and moments of care. Alara extended her hand, guiding a thin spiral of smoke with her fingers. Look closely. Each curl is a crossroads, each drift a direction. Life is not a straight path. It bends, it folds, it moves like this smoke, shaping itself around the choices we make, the kindnesses we offer, and the attention we pay. The apprentices leaned in, watching the smoke gather and stretch, forming shapes that reminded them of distant mountains, rivers, and cities. It was a map drawn not on paper, but in the ephemeral language of the world itself, fleeting, fragile, yet infinitely instructive. Maps are not always meant to be read by the eyes, Alara continued. Some are meant to be felt by the heart. And this one, she said, touching the smoke lightly, shows us where care has gone before and where it might go next. A wind stirred, carrying the smoke upward. It drifted over valleys and forests, leaving patterns invisible to anyone not willing to look. Yet for those who had learned the oath of the ember, the map was clear. Every act of attention, every patient gesture, every whispered promise left a trail. And every trail was a path to a world brighter than the one we inherit. The apprentices understood. To follow the map was to follow hope itself, guided not by signs of conquest or power, but by the quiet, enduring light of care and connection. And as the smoke faded into the night sky, it promised that the journey had only just begun. As the apprentices followed the twisting trails of smoke, the forest around them seemed to shift. Shadows stretched longer than they should, and the wind carried whispers that were almost voices. Each step forward became a test not of strength, but of awareness and intent. The map drawn in smoke did not punish recklessness, yet it revealed every lapse of attention. Lyra stumbled over a hidden root, and her ember flickered. She paused, hands trembling. The smoke above her swirled into a dark spiral, as if reflecting her doubt. Alara knelt beside her. Do not fear the shadow, she said softly. Even Prometheus' fire faced the darkness of the unknown. The ember does not leave you. It merely asks you to steady your mind and renew your care. Taking a deep breath, Lyra cupped her ember close, letting the warmth soothe her. The smoke above shifted, forming delicate arches that pointed the way forward. She realized that the map was not something to conquer, it was something to converse with, to understand and respect. Further along, a clearing opened to reveal a river whose surface mirrored the stars. The apprentices hesitated. The ember's glow was dim, threatened by the reflective expanse. Do not see obstacles as walls, Alara said, stepping lightly. See them as mirrors. The flame will show you who you are, and who you might become, but you carry it with care. One by one, they crossed the river, letting their embers float gently above the water before catching them again. Each step tested patience, presence, and reverence. Every flicker of the flame reminded them that even a gift, as small as fire, carried both risk and promise. By the time they reached the far edge of the clearing, the apprentices understood more than directions. They had learned the language of smoke, the patience of fire, and the wisdom of Prometheus' gift. Each ember they carried was now more than light, it was a teacher, a guide, and a promise that even the smallest spark, tended with care, could illuminate the unseen paths of the world. And as the smoke rose again, twisting toward the stars, it traced a path that was no longer invisible. It was alive with the knowledge, courage, and hope of those willing to follow, not to claim, but to honor the flame. At last, the apprentices arrived at a vast clearing, unlike any place they had seen before. The smoke here rose thicker, curling into shapes that seemed almost sentient, dancing with a quiet, purposeful rhythm. In the center of the clearing, a single, larger ember hovered above a stone pedestal, glowing steadily as if it had always waited for them. Ilara approached her, eyes reflecting the firelight. "This is the heart of the map," she said softly. "Every path you have followed, every spiral of smoke you have traced, leads here. It is not a treasure, nor a prize, it is understanding. The ember is a symbol of Prometheus' gift, fire, given freely, yet meaningful only in the hands of those who care for it wisely." One by one, the apprentices stepped forward, holding their own embers toward the central flame. As each ember touched the hovering fire, it did not merge, nor consume it, resonated, vibrating in harmony. The smoke above swirled faster, forming images of distant lands, people, and moments where light had been nurtured. The map had become alive, showing not paths of conquest or power, but the trail of careful, patient attention that connected all things. Lyra whispered, "The fire, it's teaching us." "Yes," Ilara replied. "Like Prometheus' flame, it does not demand obedience or control. It teaches patience, courage, and care. It reminds us that the smallest act of attention can ripple outward, illuminating the unseen corners of the world." The apprentices stood in awe, feeling the warmth of their embers pulse with the heart of the central flame. In that moment, they understood the map was never fixed, it was living, breathing, and waiting for those willing to tend it. Every choice, every gentle act, every spark of attention became a line on the invisible map, guiding future travelers toward hope, connection, and light. As the night deepened, the smoke drifted skyward, scattering across the forest and valleys. And though the apprentices could not follow every wisp, they carried the map within themselves. Each ember was a promise that fire, when given with care, could light the world. And so, the journey continued, not toward an end, but toward understanding. As the apprentices became keepers of the flame, bearers of Prometheus' quiet, enduring gift, the night air settled around them, calm yet alive with the faint hum of embers. The apprentices remained in the clearing, each holding their small flame close, feeling its warmth seep into their palms and hearts. The map of smoke had led them here, not to a destination, but to understanding. Ilara knelt beside the central flame, tracing a finger through the rising smoke. "Prometheus did not give fire as a gift of power," she said. "He gave it so humanity could choose. Fire is potential, responsibility, and insight. And like him, we are given the chance to carry it wisely." The apprentices looked at one another, seeing the reflection of the central flame in each other's eyes. The smoke spiraled above them, forming fleeting images, bridges, rivers, mountains, and cities, but also hands holding embers, hearts opening, minds imagining. Each figure was a reminder that light grows not from force, but from care. Ilara stepped forward. "Then the map isn't about finding a place," she said. "It's about how we carry the flame." Ilara smiled. "Exactly. The map is drawn in smoke because it cannot be held, controlled, or hoarded. It exists in motion, in observation, and in the choices we make. Each ember is a teacher, each wisp a lesson, and each of you is now part of its story." The wind rose, carrying the smoke higher, blending it with the stars above. The apprentices felt a strange certainty. They were both small and vast, fragile yet powerful. Each ember in their hands was proof that even a single spark, if tended with patience and courage, could illuminate paths unseen. "Remember this," Ilara whispered. "The world is full of shadows, but also of embers waiting to ignite. Like Prometheus, we do not command the fire. We honor it, nurture it, and let it guide others. And in doing so, we become the map." The apprentices closed their eyes, feeling the warmth spread through them, understanding that the journey was eternal. Smoke would rise and fade, embers would flicker and glow, yet the light they carried, the fire of care, wisdom, and attention, would continue, tracing unseen paths for all who followed. And in the quiet of the night, the forest seemed to lean closer, as if listening, as if learning, bearing witness to the keepers of the flame. As the apprentices descended from the plateau, the forest around them seemed transformed. Every leaf shimmered faintly with dew, catching the light of their embers. Smoke still rose in delicate spirals, but now it was less a map and more a mirror reflecting their thoughts, fears, and newfound understanding. A sudden fog rolled in, thick and silver, curling around the trees like gentle fingers. The path vanished beneath their feet. The apprentices paused, unsure of where to go. Alara lifted her ember higher. "The fire shows not the path," she said, "but the presence. Trust in your attention. Let the spark illuminate what you cannot yet see." Step by step, the apprentices moved forward, their flames guiding them not by casting light outward alone, but by revealing the contours of their own hearts. The fog parted slightly with each careful, deliberate motion, and shapes emerged: ancient stones, gnarled roots, and winding streams, all forming subtle patterns like smoke tracing invisible constellations. Then came a gust of wind that threatened to snuff out their flames. The apprentices instinctively shielded their embers with their hands, huddling close together. "The wind tests your care," Alara said. "Like Prometheus' fire, the gift is fragile. To honor it is to protect it, not for selfish gain, but for the world it can illuminate." Each apprentice felt the lesson deep within. They realized that challenges were never meant to extinguish them, but to teach patience, focus, and respect. The smoke above twisted into the shapes of dragons and phoenixes, symbols of transformation, resilience, and renewal. Lyra, holding her ember steady, whispered, "It's not the path that matters, but how we carry the flame." Alara nodded. "Yes. The flame is a teacher, the smoke a story, and your choices the ink. Every act of care, every thoughtful step, leaves a mark invisible to the eyes, but visible to the world." By evening, the fog had cleared, revealing a valley bathed in golden light. The smoke rose in a final spiral, forming a radiant arch above them, a symbol of Prometheus' gift and the journey they had undertaken. They stood beneath it, embers held high, understanding that the map lived not in the terrain, but in themselves, their attention, courage, and the quiet, persistent light they carried. And as night fell, the embers glowed softly, a promise to the world. Even a single spark, tended with care, could illuminate the unseen, inspire the timid, and guide countless paths. The apprentices had become keepers of the fire, and the map and smoke would live on through every choice they made. As night deepened, a soft silver mist drifted along the valley floor. The apprentices felt a strange stillness, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Each ember pulsed with warmth, a quiet heartbeat against the cool air. They realized that the map and smoke had become not just a guide, but a reflection of their own inner courage and care. Suddenly, a low murmur rose from the forest, like the whisper of ancient voices. The smoke above them curled into intricate patterns, interlocking rings, twisting vines, and faint constellations. Each apprentice sensed a new challenge for them, one of force, but of awareness. Alara spoke softly. "The fire you carry is fragile, but it is also enduring. Prometheus did not give fire to destroy or dominate, but to illuminate and inspire. Tonight, the smoke will teach you how to see without judgment, how to act without haste, and how to honor what is unseen." A shadow passed over the group, a dense fog that seemed to carry the weight of their doubts. Lyra's flame flickered violently. She swallowed her fear and held her ember steady. Immediately, the smoke above responded, curling gently around her flame as if to protect it. The lesson was clear. Care and mindfulness could guide not just the fire, but the path itself. The apprentices continued through the valley, facing symbolic trials: a fallen tree that required cooperation to cross, a winding stream reflecting their own faces and fears, and a silent grove where each ember's glow revealed hidden runes carved in stone. Every obstacle was a test of attention, courage, and unity. Hours later, they reached a quiet plateau overlooking the forest. Smoke spiraled high into the sky, forming the shape of a phoenix rising, its wings stretching across the horizon. Alara raised her hand, letting the fire in her palm merge with the light above. "This is the heart of the map," she said. It lives not in roads or landmarks, but in how carefully, courageously, and lovingly you carry the flame. The apprentices stood in reverent silence, embers held high. They felt the weight of responsibility, the joy of discovery, and the quiet promise that even the smallest spark, when nurtured with care, could illuminate entire worlds. The smoke above faded slowly into the night sky, leaving behind a profound truth. The journey was eternal, and the fire they carried would guide countless unseen paths, just as Prometheus' gift had guided generations before them. And in that stillness, the apprentices understood, the map was alive, the flame eternal, and they had become true keepers of both. The first light of dawn stretched across the horizon, soft and golden. The apprentices stood at the edge of a high cliff overlooking the valley, embers glowing like tiny suns in their hands. Below, the forest stretched endlessly, shrouded in lingering smoke that traced invisible rivers and pathways. Elara turned to them. The final test is not of skill, nor of courage alone. It is of understanding. You must learn to see the flame not just as a guide, but as a teacher, a mirror, and a promise. Only then can the map truly reveal itself. Before them, a dense wall of mist rose like a living barrier. Within it, shadows twisted into forms, creatures of smoke, each representing doubt, fear, and temptation. Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounding, her ember trembling. She remembered Elara's words, "The fire asks for care, attention, and respect, never dominance." With steady hands, she lifted her flame and let its warmth flow outward, illuminating the mist without pushing it away. Slowly, the shadows softened. The smoke began to spiral upward, forming symbols of dragons, phoenixes, and ancient trees, the eternal dance of fire, life, and wisdom. Each apprentice followed suit, extending their embers, letting the light mingle, not to control the smoke, but to honor it. Elara's voice rang out, calm and clear. Prometheus gave the world fire, yes, but the true gift was the lesson, that a spark, once nurtured, can illuminate what is unseen, heal what is broken, and inspire what is timid. The flame grows not from force, but from understanding. The map is complete when the fire is shared wisely and reverently. The apprentices felt it, a profound connection to the world, to each other, and to the lineage of fire that stretched back through time. The smoke above swirled into a radiant arch, framing the valley like a living cathedral of light. It was both map and monument, guide and story, teacher and mirror. As they descended from the cliff, each step guided by the glowing embers, they understood that their journey had only begun. The map and smoke would continue to shift, flow, and teach, but now, they carried the wisdom to read it, to honor it, and to share it. And so, beneath the rising sun, with flames held high and heart steady, the apprentices became true keepers of Prometheus' gift, living embodiments of the fire that lights not only the world, but the soul. The map and smoke would endure, eternal, as long as even a single ember was held with care. Dawn began to touch the sky, painting the smoke in shades of gold and rose. The apprentices, though tired, felt renewed. Their embers glowed stronger than before, not just with fire, but with understanding. The clearing no longer seemed like a place on a map, it had become a mirror of their own hearts. Elara spoke, her voice carrying like the wind itself. The map and smoke is alive because you are alive. Fire, like thought and courage, moves through those willing to guide it. Prometheus' gift is not just light, it is trust. And now, that trust rests with you. As they prepared to leave, the smoke swirled one final time, forming shapes of creatures both real and imagined. A dragon curling over a city of clouds, a phoenix rising from its own ashes, a river of stars flowing between mountains. Each symbol was a reminder that every ember, every act of care, every choice made with attention could shape worlds unseen. Lyra watched the smoke fade into the horizon. "So this is the path forward," she said. "Not just where we go, but how we carry the flame." "Yes," Elara replied, her eyes glinting with quiet pride. The journey does not end at the clearing. Each of you is now a part of the living map. The fire you carry will guide others as it has guided you. And remember, like Prometheus, the flame asks only that you nurture it, never misuse it, and always share it with those ready to learn. They stepped out of the clearing together, each carrying their ember as both a light and a promise. The forest around them seemed to hum in response, the air alive with the memory of smoke and flame. The apprentices now knew that their journey was not toward a single destination, but toward endless horizons, each path lit by the spark of careful, mindful courage. And as they vanished into the morning mist, the smoke lingered, tracing invisible trails across the world, a silent, eternal map of hope, wisdom, and the enduring gift of Prometheus fire. The apprentices continued their journey, stepping carefully through the forest as the morning light mingled with the lingering smoke. Each ember in their hands seemed alive, pulsating with a quiet rhythm that mirrored their own heartbeats. The map in smoke had shown them more than paths, it had revealed the inner landscapes of patience, courage, and attention. Ilara walked beside them, her voice gentle yet commanding. The flame is never just a tool. Like Prometheus' gift, it reflects the choices you make. It can illuminate what is hidden, reveal what is forgotten, and guide what is yet to be discovered. But it demands respect. Carelessness dims it, thoughtlessness scatters it. Ahead, the forest thickened. Shadows stretched between the trees, yet the smoke above formed intricate patterns, hinting at hidden clearings, secret streams, and ancient stones. The apprentices realized that the map was not only a guide for where to walk, but also for how to perceive. Every swirl of smoke, every flicker of flame carried meaning. It was a dialogue between the world and those willing to observe. Lyra paused, her ember flickering uncertainly. "How do we know we're reading it right?" she asked. Ilara smiled. "The flame does not lie, but it does not speak in words. It teaches through patience and presence. Listen with your hands, your heart, and your mind. Watch how the smoke bends to the wind, how it curls around obstacles, how it rises higher when you act with care. That is your lesson." Hours passed, and the apprentices faced trials that were unseen yet profound. A gust that threatened to extinguish their flames, a fallen tree that forced them to find new footing, a shadow that reflected their own fears. Each challenge was a mirror, revealing how they tended their embers and how they responded to uncertainty. Slowly, they began to understand that the journey itself was the map, and the map was their journey. By dusk, they arrived at a high ridge, where the smoke twisted into shapes of dragons, phoenixes, and rivers of stars, echoing the stories of Prometheus and the fire he gave. Here, the apprentices no longer felt like seekers, they were keepers. Their embers glowed brighter, not from the act of carrying fire, but from the understanding that each spark, nurtured with care, could illuminate not only paths but hearts. Ilara looked at them with quiet pride. "You have seen that even the smallest flame carries the weight of possibility. You have learned that to honor the gift is to honor the world. Prometheus' fire is not in the flame itself, but in the attention, courage, and care you bring to it. That is the map. That is the journey. And that, my students, is the oath of the last ember." As night fell, the smoke rose into the sky, scattering across valleys and forests, tracing invisible trails for future travelers. The apprentices stood together, embers in hand, knowing that the path ahead would always be illuminated not by force, but by the quiet, persistent light of responsibility, hope, and understanding. The night deepened, but the apprentices did not rest. The ridge offered a clear view of the valley below, where mist mingled with the last traces of smoke. Each ember pulsed like a heartbeat, and the apprentices felt the subtle vibration of their own courage reflected in the fire. The map was no longer lines drawn in smoke, it had become a living guide within themselves. Ilara lifted her hand, and the apprentices instinctively followed. "Tonight," she said, "we do not walk the path ahead, we walk within." Fire, like thought, like hope, reveals what is unseen. Prometheus' gift is not merely warmth, it is the spark that calls forth understanding, patience, and care. And each of you carries that spark. Suddenly, The wind shifted, carrying smoke from unseen fires far below. The shapes twisted into strange figures, mountains bending, rivers flowing upward, shadows of creatures that seemed both friendly and challenging. Each apprentice felt a pull, a subtle test of their focus. Lyra's flame wavered. She realized the smoke mirrored her own uncertainty. Alara nodded knowingly. "Do not fight it," she whispered. "The flame does not ask you to conquer the shadow. It asks you to see it, to respect it, and to move with it. Like Prometheus, fire teaches not through violence, but through presence." Step by step, they followed the undulating smoke, each ember illuminating the twists and turns. A fallen branch blocked their path. They bent it gently aside rather than breaking it. A deep puddle reflected the stars above. They walked around it carefully, noting how their reflections shifted with the flames. Every choice mattered, every action resonated. Hours passed, and the apprentices grew weary yet enlightened. They realized the map's true lesson, that the world is made of small sparks of intention, and that fire, once given, grows not from control, but from careful tending. The embers were no longer just tools, they were teachers, mirrors, and guides. By dawn, the ridge opened onto a plateau where smoke rose in intricate spirals, forming a glowing arch. Alara gestured toward it. "Here lies the heart of the map," she said. "Not a place, but a principle. The flame lives in your hands, your hearts, and your choices. Carry it wisely, as Prometheus did, and it will illuminate the unseen paths of the world." The apprentices stepped beneath the arch. Embers lifted high. The smoke swirled above, forming shapes that seemed to reach for the stars. In that moment, they understood that their journey was not toward an end, but toward endless discovery. The fire within them, like Prometheus' gift, would guide countless paths, teach countless hearts, and illuminate worlds yet unseen. And as the smoke drifted upward, dissolving into the morning sky, the apprentices knew the map would continue to live not in ink or stone, but in every careful, courageous act they would take henceforth. As the apprentices walked down the valley, the smoke above shifted into delicate, intricate patterned symbols, not of destinations, but of choices. Each curl, each spiral, each wisp reflected not a place on a map, but a lesson of the journey. The fire within their hands flickered, responding to their intentions, growing steadier as their understanding deepened. Alara paused at a small clearing where the mist formed a perfect circle. "Here," she said, "we honor the spark itself. Prometheus did not give fire to conquer the night, but to illuminate it. The world is vast, full of unseen paths, but the flame shows the way not by forcing the future, but by revealing what is already there." Ira looked at her ember and whispered, "It feels alive, like it knows what I am thinking." "Yes," Alara replied. "The fire is a teacher, a mirror, and a companion. It asks for care, attention, and patience. It will guide you through shadow, through uncertainty, and even through fear, but only if you treat it with reverence." The apprentices formed a circle, letting their flames merge in a shared glow. The smoke above rose higher, forming shapes that seemed to tell stories. Dragons twisting through starry skies, phoenixes rising from ashes, rivers flowing backward. Each symbol carried the weight of myth, memory, and promise. "The map drawn in smoke," Alara said, "is not lines or landmarks. It is a living story. Each ember, each choice, each act of attention writes it anew." Just as Prometheus' gift was never a tool of destruction, but a spark of wisdom, the map teaches that even the smallest light can illuminate endless worlds. Night faded into dawn. The valley was alive with gentle gold light. The apprentices understood that their journey was not toward a final destination, but toward endless discovery. Every spark they carried, every act of care, every mindful step would leave an invisible trail of light in the world. And so they walked on, embers glowing bright, hearts attuned to the lessons of fire and smoke. The map would continue to shift and swirl, eternal as the gift of Prometheus, eternal as the courage and attention of those who dared to carry the flame. The valley widened, opening into a grove where the trees arched high, their branches intertwined, like fingers of stone and wood. Here, The smoke thickened, curling in slow, deliberate spirals. Each apprentice felt the weight of their own intentions, as if the forest itself were reflecting the fire within their hearts. Ilara gestured to the embers in their hands. Now, you must walk through the trial of reflection. The smoke will show you not what lies ahead, but what is already within. Do not turn away. Do not rush. Watch, learn, and act with care. A soft wind rose, lifting the smoke into delicate ribbons that formed shapes of mythical creatures. A dragon coiled around a sun, a phoenix mid-flight, a serpent curled into infinity. Each apprentice felt a subtle challenge. Lyra's ember flickered as the smoke shaped itself into a mirror, showing her deepest fears: hesitation, doubt, the urge to control. She inhaled deeply and remembered Ilara's teaching. The flame is a guide, a mirror, a teacher. She did not push the smoke away, nor try to ignore it. Instead, she held her ember high, letting its warmth mingle with the swirling mist. The smoke responded, softening, flowing gently around her, bracing her courage rather than resisting it. The other apprentices followed, each learning to see the smoke not as an obstacle, but as a reflection. Every step became deliberate, every action thoughtful. Fallen logs were lifted carefully, streams were crossed with attention, and the delicate plants at their feet were spared. The journey was no longer about reaching a destination, it was about how they carried the fire, and what they learned along the way. At last, the grove opened into a clearing bathed in golden light. The smoke rose high, forming a radiant archway, a living symbol of Prometheus' gift. Ilara spoke softly, her voice carrying the weight of generations. This is the heart of the map. It lives not in paths or landmarks, but in the choices you make, the care you show, and the courage you carry. The flame is eternal, but it must be tended. The apprentices stepped forward, embers held high. The smoke above swirled into intricate patterns, a dance of light and shadow, fire and air, myth and wisdom. They realized that the journey would continue beyond this grove, but the lessons of fire, attention, and reverence would guide them forever. And as the sun rose higher, spilling golden light across the valley, they understood. The map drawn in smoke was not merely a path, but a living story, one they would carry in every act of care, every spark they shared, and every step they took into the unseen worlds beyond. As the apprentices moved deeper into the clearing, a new challenge revealed itself: a circle of stones, each one etched with faint, glowing runes. The smoke above twisted into concentric rings, pulsing with soft light. It was clear that this was not just a path, but a test of harmony and attention. Ilara knelt by the first stone. Each rune represents a choice, she said. You cannot ignore them, nor can you rush. The flame you carry will reveal the truth, but only if you approach with care and humility. Prometheus' fire was never meant to conquer, but to illuminate. Lyra stepped forward, her hand steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. She held her ember close to the runes. One by one, they glowed brighter, responding to her attention and gentleness. She realized that the smoke was a mirror of her own intentions. Hesitation dimmed the glow, clarity made it shine. The other apprentices followed, each learning to balance courage with patience, strength with understanding. The smoke swirled around them, forming shapes of phoenixes rising from ashes, dragons coiling gracefully, and streams of light flowing like invisible rivers. Every movement became a dance, every choice a brushstroke on the map of smoke. Hours passed, though it felt like moments. The circle of stones dissolved into soft mist, and the clearing opened to a valley bathed in golden dawn. The smoke rose high, forming a vast arch, a living cathedral of light. Ilara spoke, her voice carrying the quiet authority of experience. The map drawn in smoke is not merely a path, nor is it a final destination. It is a story of attention, care, and courage. Each ember is a teacher, each step a lesson. Like Prometheus' fire, asks for responsibility, reverence, and patience. Tend it well, and it will illuminate countless paths. Neglect it, and even the brightest flame may fade. The apprentices stood beneath the glowing arch, embers held high. They understood that their journey had only begun, but that they had gained something eternal, the wisdom to carry the flame, to honor it, and to share it without fear or greed. The smoke above twisted into a final, shimmering shape of phoenix. Mid-flight, wings spread wide, a symbol of renewal, hope, and the eternal gift of fire. As the sun climbed higher, casting long golden rays across the valley, they began their descent, each step careful, deliberate, and full of purpose. The map lived in their attention, their choices, and their hearts. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between flame and smoke, the spirit of Prometheus smiled, knowing that his gift had found worthy keepers. As the apprentices descended the valley, the mist thickened once more, forming a labyrinth of swirling smoke. Here, the final lesson awaited, the trial of unity. Each path split into countless trails, some luminous, others shadowed, and each apprentice realized that only together could they navigate the maze. Alara's voice echoed softly. Prometheus' gift was never meant for one alone. Fire is most powerful when shared. The smoke will test your connection to one another and to the flame. Alone, you may wander. Together, you will illuminate the unseen. The apprentices joined hands, embers glowing brighter as their warmth mingled. Every flicker of light responded to trust, care, and cooperation. Shadows of doubt appeared, swirling like restless spirits, but the collective flame held steady, pushing the darkness aside without force. At the heart of the labyrinth, the smoke rose into a towering spiral. Inside it, they saw visions, villages lit with warm fires, children learning by candlelight, travelers guided through dark forests, and mountains glowing under the aurora of flames. The apprentices understood then that the map was not a route, but a reflection of every life. Their fire could touch the endless ripple of care, courage, and knowledge. Lyra whispered, "It's not just about the path. It's about what the flame does in the world." Alara smiled. "Exactly. Prometheus' fire is not merely warmth or light. It is wisdom, compassion, and the courage to act. The map in smoke shows not where to go, but how to be. Each ember is a seed. Every choice nurtures its growth." The labyrinth dissolved, the smoke rising in a magnificent spiral that merged with the morning sky. The apprentices stood together, their flames bright, hearts steady, and minds full of understanding. The journey had transformed them. The fire they carried was no longer just a tool or a guide, it was a living emblem of hope, attention, and shared responsibility. And as the sun bathed the valley in golden light, they walked forward, knowing that the map drawn in smoke would continue to shift, teaching future travelers the same lessons of care, courage, and unity, just as Prometheus' gift had done across the ages. The valley opened into a vast plain, bathed in the first rays of the late morning sun. The smoke above had lifted, but its remnants lingered in spirals that caught the light like strands of gold. Each apprentice carried their ember, now steady and unwavering, as if it had absorbed the lessons of the labyrinth. Alara paused and spoke softly. "The fire you hold is not just a flame. It is a teacher, a memory, and a promise. Prometheus gave the first spark, but it is your care that keeps it alive. The map in smoke is never complete, it evolves with each choice, each act of attention, each shared moment of understanding." The apprentices spread out, observing the plain. Small plants glowed faintly where their embers had passed, and stones reflected the firelight in patterns that resembled constellations. The map was no longer an abstract shape in the smoke, it was alive in the world itself, marking the places where attention, courage, and care had been exercised. Lyra lifted her ember high. "It feels infinite, like the fire connects everything, the valley, the sky, the smoke, and us." "Yes," Alara said. "The ember is a bridge between the seen and unseen." Prometheus did not only light the night, he illuminated understanding itself. Every act of tending the flame, every choice to act with care, a new path into the world. This is the final lesson. The fire is not possession, it is stewardship. Its power grows when it is shared and respected. The apprentices walked slowly across the plain, letting the flames guide them. They noticed small patterns in the grass, shapes in the stones, and the faint shimmer of light on distant hills. Each observation was a new insight, a new line in the living map that only revealed itself through attention and reflection. As they reached the horizon, the sky became a canvas of fire and gold. The smoke rose one last time, forming the shape of Prometheus himself, holding aloft a torch. In that image, the apprentices saw both a warning and an inspiration. The gift of fire requires wisdom, courage, and respect, but it also holds the potential to illuminate worlds and hearts alike. And so, with embers glowing and heart steady, they stepped forward into the unknown, carrying not just fire, but the understanding that every spark has the power to shape the world, just as Prometheus once taught. Alara paused at a small clearing where the mist formed a perfect circle. Here, she said, we honor the spark itself. Prometheus did not give fire to conquer the night, but to illuminate it. The world is vast, full of unseen paths, but the flame shows the way not by forcing the future, but by revealing what is already. Lyra looked at her ember and whispered, "It feels alive, like it knows what I am thinking." "Yes," Alara replied. "The fire is a teacher, a mirror, and a companion. It asks for care, attention, and patience. It will guide you through shadow, uncertainty, and fear, but only if you treat it with reverence." The apprentices formed a circle, letting their flames merge in a shared glow. The smoke above rose higher, forming shapes that seemed to tell stories, dragons twisting through starry skies, phoenixes rising from ashes, rivers flowing backward. Each symbol carried the weight of myth, memory, and promise. The map drawn in smoke, Alara said, is not lines or landmarks. It is a living story. Each ember, each choice, each act of attention writes it anew. Just as Prometheus' gift was never a tool of destruction, but a spark of wisdom, the map teaches that even the smallest light can illuminate endless worlds. The valley widened, opening into a grove where the trees arched high, their branches intertwined like fingers of stone and wood. Here, the smoke thickened, curling in slow, deliberate spirals. Each apprentice felt the weight of their own intentions, as if the forest itself reflected the fire within their hearts. Alara gestured to the embers in their hands. "Now, you must walk through the trial of reflection. The smoke will show you, not what lies ahead, but what is already within. Do not turn away. Do not rush. Watch, learn, and act with care." A soft wind rose, lifting the smoke into delicate ribbons that formed shapes of mythical creatures. A dragon coiled around a sun, a phoenix mid-flight, a serpent curled into infinity. Each apprentice felt a subtle challenge. Lyra's ember flickered, as the smoke shaped itself into a mirror, showing her deepest fears: hesitation, doubt, the urge to control. She inhaled deeply and remembered Alara's teaching. The flame is a guide, a mirror, a teacher. She did not push the smoke away, nor try to ignore it. Instead, she held her ember high, letting its warmth mingle with the swirling mist. The smoke responded, softening, flowing gently around her, bracing her courage rather than resisting it. Hours passed, though it felt like moments. The circle of stones dissolved into soft mist, and the clearing opened to a valley bathed in golden dawn. The smoke rose high, forming a vast arch, a living cathedral of light. Alara spoke, her voice carrying the quiet authority of experience. The map drawn in smoke is not merely a path, nor a final destination. It is a story of attention, care, and courage. Each ember is a teacher, each step a lesson. Like Prometheus' fire asks for responsibility, reverence, and patience. Tend it well, and it will illuminate countless paths. Neglect it, and even the brightest flame may fade. The apprentices stood beneath the glowing arch, embers held high. They understood that their journey had only begun, but that they had gained something eternal: the wisdom to carry the flame, to honor it, and to share it without fear or greed. The smoke above twisted into a final, shimmering shape of phoenix. Mid-flight, wings spread wide, a symbol of renewal, hope, and the eternal gift of fire. As the valley opened into a vast plain, the smoke above lifted, but its remnants lingered in spirals, catching the sunlight like strands of gold. Each apprentice carried their ember, now steady and unwavering, as if it had absorbed the lessons of the labyrinth. Ilara spoke softly. The fire you hold is not just a flame. It is a teacher, a memory, and a promise. Prometheus gave the first spark, but it is your care that keeps it alive. The map in smoke is never complete. It evolves with each choice, each act of attention, each shared moment of understanding. Lyra lifted her ember high. It feels infinite, like the fire connects everything: the valley, the sky, the smoke, and us. Yes, Alara said. The ember is a bridge between the seen and unseen. Prometheus did not only light the night, he illuminated understanding itself. Every act of tending the flame, every choice to act with care, a new path into the world. This is the final lesson. The fire is not possession, it is stewardship. Its power grows when it is shared and respected. The apprentices walked across the plain, letting the flames guide them. They noticed patterns in the grass, shapes in the stones, and the faint shimmer of light on distant hills. Each observation was a new insight, a new line in the living map that only revealed itself through attention and reflection. At the horizon, the sky became a canvas of fire and gold. The smoke rose one last time, forming the shape of Prometheus himself, holding aloft a torch. The apprentices saw both a warning and an inspiration. The gift of fire requires wisdom, courage, and respect, but it also holds the potential to illuminate worlds and hearts alike. With embers glowing and heart steady, they stepped forward into the unknown, carrying not just fire, but the understanding that every spark has the power to shape the world, just as Prometheus once taught. As the apprentices advanced, the plain seemed to stretch infinitely, yet the smoke began to rise again, forming a maze of shimmering trails. Each trail seemed alive, twisting and coiling like serpents made of light. It was the final test, the trial of reflection. Here, the map drawn in smoke would reveal not their path forward, but the truths they carried within themselves. Alara turned to them. Prometheus' fire teaches more than courage. It teaches awareness. Each ember mirrors the soul that carries it. You cannot hide from it, nor can you control it fully. Only by understanding your own flame can you navigate the world without burning it or yourself. Lyra's ember quivered as smoke formed a mirror before her, reflecting her doubts and fears. Shadows of hesitation danced across her vision, the fear of failure, of harming others, of losing control of the fire. But remembering Alara's words, she held her ember higher, letting its warmth illuminate not just the path, but her inner turmoil. Slowly, the shadows softened and merged into patterns of light, flowing like rivers across the plain. Each apprentice faced their own reflection, some seeing sorrow, some confusion, some doubt. Yet, as they embraced their fears instead of fleeing, the smoke responded, weaving their individual flames into a tapestry of radiant light. Together, their fire formed bridges over shadowed stretches of the plain, marking a path that was neither fixed nor final but alive, changing with each step. The sun reached its zenith, casting long golden beams across the valley. The smoke spiraled upward, shaping a colossal phoenix whose wings shimmered with every ember's glow. Its head tilted toward the apprentices, as if acknowledging their journey. Alara whispered, "The map drawn in smoke is complete only when your actions honor the fire. It is not the path that matters, it is how you walk it, how you nurture the flame, and how you share it. Prometheus gave fire, but it is you who keeps it alive, shapes it, and passes it onward." The apprentices stood in silence, feeling the warmth of the collective ember. For the first time, they understood the full weight of responsibility. Each spark they carried had the power to illuminate worlds, to teach, to guide, to heal. And just as Prometheus once did, they were now keepers of a gift far greater than themselves, an eternal flame of courage, wisdom, and shared light. As they stepped forward, the smoke dispersed into the morning sky, leaving trails of golden mist that shimmered like distant stars. The map was no longer just in the air or in the stones, it was alive in them, in the choices they made, and in the care with which they carried the flame. With heart steady and embers burning bright, they moved forward, ready to face whatever lay beyond the horizon, carrying the eternal lessons of fire, attention, and unity. The apprentices moved cautiously across the plain, each step leaving faint traces of ember light in the grass. The smoke began to rise again, weaving intricate patterns that shifted with the wind. Now, it formed archways of mist that seemed almost solid, as if the air itself had become a corridor carved by fire. Alara spoke, her voice carrying over the quiet hum of the flames. The next part of your trial is the passage of choices. Here, the smoke will tempt you, showing paths that promise ease, power, or escape. But remember, the fire within you reveals what is true, not what is easy. Lyra glanced around and saw a trail of smoke leading toward a glittering hill. It beckoned like a shortcut, promising swift passage. Her heart ached with the desire to take it, but her ember pulsed warmly in her hand, reminding her of the care it required. She shook her head and chose the winding path, letting her flame guide her through twists of shadow and light. As each apprentice followed their own path, the smoke reacted, forming mirrors of their inner fears and hopes. One apprentice saw a vast wall of fire ahead, representing their doubt and guiding others. Another saw a river of molten light that seemed impossible to cross, symbolizing their hesitation to trust the unknown. Each obstacle was unique, yet the ember illuminated a path not through force, but through understanding and patience. Alara walked beside them, her own flame steady and bright. Prometheus gave fire to awaken understanding. It is not a weapon, nor a prize. Each spark you carry is a lesson in responsibility. You cannot conquer the world with it, you must nurture it, share it, and let it illuminate the paths of others. Hours passed in silence, broken only by whispered reflections and the soft hiss of ember against the mist. At last, the smoke rose higher, forming a vast, circular arena. Within it, patterns of dragons, phoenixes, and serpents shimmered like living constellations. The apprentices understood. This was the final reflection, the moment where their inner growth would become visible in the world around them. Lyra lifted her ember high. The smoke responded, forming a bridge of light that connected each apprentice's flame, weaving their individual journeys into a collective tapestry. The phoenix appeared once more, this time larger and more radiant, wings spread wide, illuminating the plain with golden fire. Alara's voice rang softly, the map drawn in smoke is not fixed. It grows with your actions, your care, and your choices. Like Prometheus' gift, it asks for courage, wisdom, and humility. Tend the flame well, share it freely, and it will illuminate not only your path, but the paths of all who follow. The apprentices walked across the glowing plain, their hearts steady and embers bright. Every step left faint trails of light, marking a living map of attention, courage, and understanding. They realized that the trial was not about reaching a destination, it was about learning to carry the spark responsibly, to honor it, and to share its warmth with the world. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the smoke dissolved into golden mist, leaving only the faint shimmer of memory. The apprentices gazed at the fading trails, feeling the weight and the promise of the fire they now carried. They had passed the trials, yet the journey was far from over. With hearts open, minds clear, and flames steady, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to illuminate the world with the gift Prometheus once brought, and that they now bore in their own hands. The apprentices now reached the heart of the plain, where the smoke swirled thickest, and the air shimmered with heat and possibility. Here, Alara paused and looked at them, her eyes reflecting the glow of every ember. This is the crucible of reflection, she said softly. Each ember you carry is not just lighted as memory, choice, and responsibility. Prometheus did not give fire merely to illuminate. He gave it to awaken understanding. Here, your flame will reveal not only your fears, but your potential. Dense column of smoke rose before them, twisting like a living pillar. Within it, shapes of every kind appeared. Serpents coiling, dragons diving, phoenixes soaring. Each apprentice felt a pull toward a particular image. Lyra's ember trembled as the smoke formed a mirror, reflecting not only her doubts, But her longing to act boldly and wisely in the world, she stepped forward, allowing the ember to pulse against her palm, letting its warmth guide her. The smoke rippled, shaping itself into a path made entirely of light. I see now, she whispered. The fire is not just a tool. It is a teacher, a mirror, a companion. It shows what we must face within ourselves before we can shape the world around us. Other apprentices followed, each facing trials unique to their inner struggles. One saw shadows of missed opportunities twisting into chains. Another found themselves before a river of liquid gold, beautiful but impossible to cross. Each challenge was less about physical obstacles and more about understanding, acceptance, and mindful action. Ilara's voice echoed, steady as stone. The fire asks for care, not conquest. Like Prometheus' gift, it cannot be taken lightly. Each ember you hold carries the weight of worlds unseen. Tend it well, nurture it, and it will illuminate not only your path, but the path of others who follow your flame. As the apprentices pressed forward, the smoke shifted into a vast dome above them, forming intricate constellations of flame. A dragon coiled around the moon, a phoenix rising over a sunlit peak, a serpent of starlight winding endlessly. The images pulsed with life, as if each flame and each choice had become part of a larger story written in fire and mist. Lyra stepped to the center, holding her ember high. The smoke responded, weaving each apprentice's light into a radiant tapestry. Every flicker of flame joined, creating bridges of light across the heart of the plane. It was a living map, a story not of destinations, but of care, courage, and attention. Ilara spoke, her voice filled with quiet pride. The map drawn in smoke is never complete. It grows with every act of mindfulness, every choice to act with wisdom, every moment of shared understanding. Prometheus' fire is not a gift to possess, but a responsibility to honor. Let your embers guide you, but do not forget the lessons they carry. The smoke began to lift, spiraling toward the horizon, leaving trails of shimmering gold in its wake. The apprentices followed, hearts steady, embers glowing bright. They understood now that the trial was not about conquering the smoke, but about understanding it and themselves. Each step forward was a promise, to nurture the fire, to honor the spark, and to share its light with the world. And as the sun dipped low, the final shape of the smoke appeared, Prometheus himself, torch held high, a silent reminder that fire is eternal, but it is care, wisdom, and courage that give it meaning. The apprentices walked on, carrying not just light, but understanding. The map of smoke remained, not in the valley or the sky, but within them, a living guide that would grow with every step, every act of courage, and every choice to illuminate rather than destroy. The apprentices paused as the golden trails of smoke began to twist and converge above them, forming shapes that seemed almost alive. A massive phoenix hovered in the haze, wings stretching across the horizon, feathers made of flickering embers. Its eyes glimmered with ancient wisdom, reflecting both fire and shadow, hope and fear. Lara stepped forward. This is the mirror of flame. Every ember you carry carries a fragment of truth. Only by facing it fully can you transform the smoke into a map, a living guide. Lyra approached cautiously. Her reflection shimmered within the smoke. Not only her doubts but the small acts of courage she had hidden even from herself. She raised her ember, and the mirror rippled, turning the shadows into threads of light. A path appeared, winding but clear, leading through a labyrinth of mist. Around her, the other apprentices each confronted their own reflections. One saw the chains of hesitation unraveling with every pulse of their ember. Another found the image of a child they had once protected, reminding them that the flame could illuminate life, not just destroy or dazzle. Every trial was a test of inner resolve, a dance between fire and self-knowledge. Ilara's voice carried across the plain. Prometheus' gift was never about possession. Fire is attention. Fire is choice. Fire is the courage to face the darkness, and the humility to let the light guide you rather than blind you. Nurture it, and it will weave a map where every step carries meaning. As the apprentices moved forward, the smoke responded, shaping bridges, stairways, and even gentle rivers of light. The map was no longer static. It flowed and shimmered with their awareness, a living manifestation of their inner growth. Lyra glanced back at Alara. I see it now. The map isn't something we follow, it is something we create with every act of care. Every choice to act with wisdom. Alara nodded. Exactly. Like Prometheus, you are bearers of fire. But it is not power that you wield, it is attention, responsibility, and the courage to shape the world without consuming it. The smoke responds to those who understand this. Every ember you carry, every choice you make, writes your path into the very fabric of existence. The apprentices continued, each step igniting faint trails in the mist, leaving a legacy of light behind them. Above, the phoenix spread its wings wider, golden embers falling like stars that illuminated the plain. The map was alive, and it would continue to grow with them, reflecting courage, wisdom, and the spark of understanding that Prometheus had once set free. Lyra felt a warmth that went beyond her ember. It was the knowledge that fire was not just something to carry, but something to honor, something that connected all who shared it. And as the sun sank lower, painting the sky with streaks of amber and crimson, the apprentices knew that the trial was not over. It had merely revealed a truth. The fire they carried could shape not only the path ahead, but the hearts and minds of all who walked alongside them. The apprentices now approached the spiral of reflections, a twisting column of smoke that seemed to stretch infinitely into the sky. Each rotation revealed visions of their past choices, fears, and moments of courage. The ember in Lyra's hand pulsed warmly, urging her forward, yet the path was treacherous not because of danger, but because it demanded honesty. Alara's voice rang softly, carrying through the smoke. Every ember contains a spark of Prometheus' wisdom. It will not show you only what you wish to see. The fire illuminates truth. Step carefully, but step bravely. Lyra saw herself hesitate, moments where she had chosen comfort over action. The smoke twisted these memories into thorned branches, blocking the path. She inhaled, letting her ember's light grow steady. Slowly, the branches turned to golden threads, weaving a bridge she could walk upon. With each step, she felt the ember's warmth seep into her heart, teaching her that courage is not absence of fear, but action despite it. The other apprentices faced their own challenges. One saw rivers of molten light that seemed impossible to cross. By focusing their ember, the water shimmered and became stepping stones. Another confronted shadows of doubt, which shifted into luminous lanterns, guiding the way forward. Each trial was unique, reflecting the truth of the fire they carried, the essence of Prometheus' gift, illumination through understanding. Alara raised her hands, and the smoke above formed shapes of ancient myths, dragons, phoenixes, and serpents, interwoven with stars and light. The map drawn in smoke, she said, is never fixed. It grows with each choice you make, each act of care. Fire is not conquest, it is responsibility. Your embers are guides, not weapons. Tend them wisely, for they will shape not only your path, but the paths of all who follow. Lyra lifted her ember high. The smoke responded, forming bridges of golden light connecting each apprentice. The spiral of reflections became a tapestry, each thread glowing with lessons learned, courage earned, and insight gained. The phoenix appeared above them, wings spreading across the sky, a living symbol of growth, renewal, and the enduring gift of fire. As the sun dipped low, painting the world in shades of amber and rose, the apprentices understood that their journey was far from over, yet they had discovered something vital. The fire within them was more than illumination, it was wisdom, courage, and the power to create paths where none seemed possible. Alara spoke one last time as the smoke began to lift. Prometheus gave fire not to dominate, but to awaken. You carry it now. Let it guide your actions, your care, and your understanding. The map is yours to draw, but remember, it grows only through responsibility, attention, and courage. The apprentices walked onward, their embers glowing brightly, leaving behind trails of light that slowly faded into the twilight. The smoke dissolved, but the lessons remained. They had learned that fire, like knowledge and compassion, is both a gift and a charge, and that carrying it wisely is the true path of illumination. Every path here is a reflection of your heart, she said. The fire within you will guide your steps, but you must decide what to illuminate and what to leave in shadow. Remember Prometheus, the gift of fire is not simply to see, but to understand. Lyra moved cautiously. Each step caused the smoke to respond, thickening where doubt lingered, thinning where courage grew. Shapes began to form within it, walls of golden light, bridges of glowing mist, doors that opened to memories she had long buried. One image made her pause, a small girl, trembling in the dark, a mirror of her younger self. Her ember flared warmly as if acknowledging her silent promise to act, even when afraid. Around her, the other apprentices faced visions just as personal. One found themselves before a vast chasm, only to discover that stepping forward made a bridge of fire appear, connecting the impossible. Another saw a forest of shadows where lost opportunities loomed. Tending the ember's light turned the shadows into guides, revealing paths they could not see before. Alara's voice rose gently above the murmuring smoke. Prometheus gave fire to awaken, not to conquer. The light you carry is both your challenge and your teacher. It will reveal fear, doubt, and regret, but also courage, wisdom, and hope. The map you create here is drawn not on stone or paper, but in the living thread of your choices. Lyra realized the truth of her journey. The map of smoke was not a guide for where to go, but a reflection of how to move mindfully, courageously, with care for both light and shadow. Each apprentice, guided by their ember, contributed to the shifting tapestry above, until the entire labyrinth glimmered with interconnected trails of fire, each a story of courage, understanding, and the promise of guidance. As the last rays of the sun slipped beneath the horizon, the smoke coalesced into the final image, Prometheus himself, torch held high, watching silently, a reminder that the fire's purpose is eternal, but its wisdom must be nurtured with responsibility. Lyra felt a warmth that was more than her ember. It was the knowledge that fire is not merely to be carried, but to be honored, tended, and shared. The apprentices stepped forward together, leaving behind trails of light that slowly merged with the rising stars. They knew the trial of the smoke had ended, but the path of fire, the true lesson of Prometheus, was only beginning. Alara moved beside her, voice calm but resonant. Prometheus' fire was never meant for control. It is not a weapon, nor a prize. It is a mirror and a guide. Every ember you carry illuminates not just the world around you, but the choices within you. Tend it, and it will reveal paths you cannot yet imagine. Around them, the other apprentices emerged from the labyrinth of choices, each carrying the subtle glow of personal revelation. One apprentice, whose ember had trembled with self-doubt, now walked steadily, a thread of gold, trailing behind like a river of courage. Another, who had feared the unknown, found their ember casting bridges of light over shadows that had once seemed impenetrable. The plain itself seemed to respond. Golden threads wove through the smoke, forming constellations of flame that mirrored the lessons learned, courage intertwined with wisdom, understanding woven with compassion. Lyra watched the pattern shift, realizing that the map was no longer just a guide for walking. It was a reflection of the fire within, alive and expanding with every act of insight. Alara raised her hands, and the smoke above twisted into the final vision. Prometheus, torch held high, wings of fire stretching wide across the sky. His gaze was steady, not judging, but acknowledging. Remember, she said, the gift of fire is eternal, but its meaning is yours to shape. Your ember carries responsibility. Nurture it, share it, let it illuminate not just your path, but the paths of all who follow your light. Lyra felt a warmth that transcended the ember, a deep understanding that fire was more than illumination. It was attention, care, and courage combined. She lifted her hand, and the ember pulsed in harmony with the glowing threads of the labyrinth. The map, drawn in smoke, shimmered one last time, revealing not a destination, but an ever-changing path, alive with possibility. As twilight deepened, the apprentices moved forward together, leaving the heart of the plain behind. Their embers glowed steadily, guiding each step. They carried with them more than light. They carried the promise of understanding, the wisdom of Prometheus, and the knowledge that the map of smoke would continue to grow, reflecting every choice, every act of care, and every spark of courage they would share in the world beyond. The chapter closed with the soft hum of embers fading into night, leaving a lingering truth. Fire is a gift, a responsibility, and a living teacher, and those who honor it will never walk in darkness again. Alara moved ahead, her presence calm but commanding. "This is not a trial of strength," she said. "It is a trial of attention." Prometheus gave fire to humanity not to dominate, but to awaken. The ember you carry is both a torch and a mirror. It will show the truth you seek, but it will also reveal the truths you hide. Only by acknowledging them will you draw the map of your path. The first challenge appeared as the spiral of reflections. Smoke twisted upward, forming a massive helix, its curves shimmering with the faint glow of embers that seemed older than the world itself. Lyra stepped closer. Within the smoke, she saw visions of her own fear, the times she had withheld her voice, moments when she had chosen comfort over action, and even fleeting thoughts of despair that had once shadowed her heart. Her ember flared, bright and steady, and slowly the helix bent, transforming her fears into threads of gold that wove a bridge she could traverse. Each step forward caused the bridge to expand, reshaping itself according to her resolve. Around her, the other apprentices faced their own reflections. One saw rivers of molten shadow stretching impossibly wide. The ember revealed stepping stones of fire that shimmered into existence as soon as courage was summoned. Another confronted towering walls of smoke, filled with fragmented memories of lost opportunities. Tend the ember carefully, and the walls softened, turning into columns of light that guided the way. Each challenge mirrored the essence of Prometheus' gift, illumination through understanding. The path widened into the labyrinth of choices. Every step caused the smoke to respond, twisting into shapes that reflected the apprentices' hearts. Shadows of doubt emerged from the mist, but the ember's glow transformed them into luminous lanterns, each one a guide. Lyra paused before a door of smoke, and through it, she saw a younger version of herself. Trembling in the dark, she extended her ember toward the vision. The light poured in, revealing not just her past fear, but the courage she had hidden in that moment. The door opened, and she stepped through, carrying both memory and wisdom forward. Alara's voice echoed across the labyrinth. "Fire is a teacher, not a weapon. Every ember you carry will illuminate paths, but only if you understand the weight of the flame." Prometheus gave fire as a gift, but it is responsibility, attention, and compassion that truly shape the world. The apprentices moved as one, a step transforming the labyrinth. Threads of golden light intertwined, forming bridges, stairways, and arcs of glowing mist. Lyra noticed that the map itself was alive. It responded to their intentions, their empathy, their courage. Every ember left a trace of its light, a reflection of choices made with care, a testament to the potential of fire when wielded wisely. A deeper trial emerged. The mirror of the phoenix. Smoke twisted into the image of a massive bird, wings stretching across the horizon, its feathers aflame with ember gold light. Its gaze was unwavering, ancient, and infinite. To pass, each apprentice had to confront the duality within themselves. The fire of creation and the fire of destruction, the flame of hope and the shadow of doubt. Lyra stepped closer, her reflection shimmered in the smoke, her fears, her hopes, her moments of indecision, all interlaced with the courage she had cultivated. She raised her ember. The phoenix shimmered and bowed, acknowledging her understanding. Alara's words floated through the smoky air. Prometheus' fire is never meant to blind or dominate. It illuminates truth, awakens wisdom, and tests courage. Nurture it, and it will reveal paths that are invisible to fear and ignorance. The map you draw is not for following, it is for becoming. Each choice, each act of care, writes your journey into the very fabric of existence. The labyrinth began to dissolve into streams of smoke and light, rising like golden rivers into the sky. Bridges formed between apprentices, connecting their paths, symbolizing unity, compassion, and shared understanding. Each ember, though small on its own, contributed to a tapestry of illumination that stretched across the plain like a living constellation. Lyra realized the map was no longer a destination, it was a reflection of their collective growth, a living guide that adapted with insight and intention. Finally, the plain opened to the heart of the smoke. The air shimmered with infinite light, and at its center hovered the eternal torch of Prometheus, framed by wings of fire that reached across the horizon. The apprentices felt the weight and beauty of responsibility pressing gently upon them. The flame was no longer just theirs, it was a reflection of every choice, every act of courage, and every moment of understanding they would carry forward. Alara's voice, calm and firm, rang through the plain. Prometheus' gift was never a possession. Fire is attention, responsibility, and the courage to face both light and shadow. Carry it, tend it, and share it wisely. Only then will the map of smoke guide not just your steps, but the steps of all who follow the light. Lyra lifted her ember high. It flared with a brilliance that made the smoke shimmer like liquid gold. She realized that fire is not merely illumination, it is wisdom, courage, and care intertwined. The apprentices stepped forward together, leaving trails of light that slowly merged with the rising stars. They knew the trial of the smoke had ended, but the path of fire, the living, breathing gift of Prometheus, was only beginning. As night fell, the golden threads of the labyrinth lingered faintly in the air, a promise that every ember, every choice, and every act of understanding would shape the world. Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the warmth within her chest, knowing that fire is not merely carried, it is tended, shared, and honored. The map drawn in smoke had revealed its truth. The journey is not about reaching an end, but about illuminating the way for oneself and others. And in that quiet twilight, the apprentices walked onward, their embers glowing steadily, leaving behind a world touched by fire, hope, and the enduring wisdom of Prometheus. Other apprentices faced trials just as personal and profound. One encountered the river of regret, whose waters shimmered with memories of lost opportunities. Stepping carefully, their ember illuminated stepping stones, showing that the past could guide rather than hinder, that understanding mistakes was a form of wisdom. Another confronted the forest of forgotten dreams, where shadows whispered temptations of giving up, of turning back. Light met shadow as the ember cast its glow, transforming the forest into a sanctuary of guiding lanterns, each one a reflection of hope rediscovered. The labyrinth eventually opened into the field of choices, vast and endless, with smoke curling into endless loops. Lyra felt the weight of responsibility more keenly than ever. Each decision, each act of courage, sent ripples through the smoke, intertwining their paths with those of the other apprentices. The map of smoke was alive, responsive, and infinitely complex, a web of light and shadow that reflected not only individual growth, but collective understanding. Above them, the smoke twisted into the phoenix of renewal. Its eyes glimmered with the wisdom of ages, wings stretching across the sky, casting golden light upon every path. The apprentices understood that passing the trial was not about reaching a final destination, but about acknowledging the fire within and learning to guide it wisely. Lara spoke once more, her voice carrying both authority and warmth. Prometheus gave fire as a gift, but gifts demand care. The ember is your teacher, your guide, and your responsibility. Tend it with attention, with courage, and with compassion. Only then can the map you draw truly reflect not the world outside, but the world within. Lyra lifted her ember, feeling its warmth expand through her chest. The smoke above shimmered and shifted, forming threads of gold that connected every apprentice, every ember, every choice they had made. The labyrinth had dissolved into a living constellation of light, a reminder that courage, understanding, and care were inseparable. As twilight fell, the apprentices stepped forward together, leaving behind trails of golden smoke that slowly merged with the night sky. Their journey through the labyrinth had ended, but the path of fire, the true legacy of Prometheus, was only beginning. Each ember glowed steadily, a beacon of hope, wisdom, and responsibility, illuminating the way for themselves and for all who would follow. The field of choices settled into quiet brilliance, leaving behind a single truth. Fire is not just light. It is awareness, it is courage, it is care, and it is the responsibility to guide others with the same warmth it provides. Lyra knew, as did every apprentice, that their journey would continue, but now, they carried the eternal spark of Prometheus, and with it, the power to illuminate the world ahead. The mist of memories formed a dense, swirling wall. Faces from the past appeared within it, family, friends, mentors, strangers whose paths had crossed theirs. The smoke whispered stories of courage and failure alike. Lyra felt a pang of longing, but also a surge of determination. She held her ember high, letting its warmth and light weave through the mist. Each face illuminated in gold smiled, nodded, or simply shimmered before fading into threads of light that braided into the path ahead. She realized that the past, no matter how painful, could become a guide rather than a burden. Ilara stepped beside her. Fire does not erase shadows, she said softly, but it transforms them. Prometheus did not give humanity fire to destroy darkness, but to illuminate it. True courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. The apprentices reached the plateau of echoes next, where every whisper they had ever held inside reverberated around them. The smoke thickened, forming shapes of doubt, guilt, and regret. Some apprentices faltered, their embers flickering, but when Lyra extended her light to the echoing shadows, they softened, forming pillars of warm gold that lifted and carried the apprentices across. She felt a surge of understanding. Fire is guidance, but only when paired with compassion for oneself and others. At last, they arrived at the horizon of fire, a vast expanse where the smoke itself seemed to rise into the sky, forming bridges, arches, and intricate patterns. There, the phoenix of renewal appeared once more, its wings vast and radiant. The apprentices felt the weight of their journey, yet also the exhilaration of accomplishment. Each ember pulsed in response, connecting them to the phoenix, to each other, and to the legacy of Prometheus. Ilara's voice resonated like a song across the horizon. Prometheus' gift was never meant to be possessed. Fire is not power, it is attention, responsibility, and insight. Every ember you carry is a seed of understanding. Tend it, share it, and let it illuminate paths not just for yourself, but for all who follow. Lyra raised her ember high, its light intertwined with the smoke above, creating a map that was no longer a simple path, but a living tapestry of courage, wisdom, and care. The labyrinth had not ended, it had transformed into a guide that would follow them wherever they went. The apprentices walked forward together, leaving trails of gold in the fading mist. The world beyond awaited, but they were no longer the same. Each ember carried the warmth of Prometheus' lesson. Light is not for destruction, but for awakening. Not for dominance, but for guidance. Not for fear, but for hope. The map drawn in smoke had revealed its truth. The journey is not about reaching an end, but about carrying light wisely, shaping the world with courage, understanding, and care. And with that realization, Lyra and the others stepped into the future, their embers shining like stars, eternal sparks of Prometheus' enduring gift. They came to the Vale of Shadows, where the smoke thickened into twisting forms that mirrored the fears of each apprentice. Lyra saw her own anxieties, self-doubt. The fear of failure solidified in smoky tendrils reaching toward her. She remembered Prometheus, the eternal flame-bearer, and how he carried fire not as a weapon, but as a gift to illuminate. With trembling hands, she lifted her ember and let its light flow into the shadows. Slowly, the tendrils softened, glowing with gold and warmth, transforming fear into insight. Ilara's voice echoed through the veil. Every ember is a choice, every spark a lesson. Prometheus gave fire to humanity, not to conquer the dark, but to understand it. The labyrinth tests not your strength, but your wisdom and compassion. Light without care can burn. Fire without guidance can destroy. True courage lies in knowing when and how to shine. As they passed, the veil of shadows dissolved into the meadow of reflection. Smoke here formed scenes from their past moments of kindness, courage, mistakes, and triumphs. Each apprentice stepped carefully, allowing their ember to illuminate the lessons hidden in memory. The smoke wove itself into a luminous tapestry, a reminder that the journey of fire was not just outward, but inward. Lyra approached the final challenge, the bridge of choices. A path of smoke stretching across an endless void. Every step she took caused the smoke beneath to shift, forming images of possible futures, paths shaped by courage, compassion, or neglect. She realized that this was the ultimate test. Prometheus' fire was not just for illumination. It was a responsibility. Every ember carried the potential to change the world, but only if wielded with wisdom. Raising her ember high, Lyra let it glow with all her intent, hope, courage, and care. The smoke responded, forming a radiant bridge of gold, solid and unyielding. The other apprentices followed, their embers joining hers, creating a constellation of light that stretched across the void. At the end of the bridge, the phoenix of renewal awaited. Its fiery wings glimmered like molten gold, eyes reflecting the lessons of the labyrinth. Lyra understood now that the journey was not about reaching a destination, but about carrying the flame wisely, guiding others, and illuminating paths with empathy and courage. Alara placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. Prometheus' gift lives in every ember you carry. Let it teach, guide, and inspire. The map drawn in smoke is never fixed. It shifts with every choice, every act of understanding, every spark of courage. Your journey has only begun. The apprentices stepped forward together, their embers bright against the rising dusk. The labyrinth behind them shimmered with golden trails, a living testament to their growth. Fire was no longer just light, it was insight, responsibility, and hope, and with it, they would shape the world, one careful spark at a time. They had left the valley before dawn, each with an ember wrapped in cloth and a knot in their voice. The embers were small, no grand torches, no braziers blazing like altars, but they thrummed with the steady insistence that made the palms that sheltered them feel full. Alara walked at their head and, as always, her presence was more a tempering than a command. Hold close, she said, in the way old people offer truths that are also invitations. Listen to what it asks. Prometheus did not steal light to bestow it like a crown. He gave a problem and a promise. We are only keepers of both. The first hours of the journey were practice. How to cup without smothering, how to shelter flame from draft without sealing it away, how to breathe near it so it would neither rage nor die. Words passed among them in low tones, practicalities, and small jokes that floated out and did not hang. The land around them answered. Dew on grass, thrushes that called like punctuation, rocks warmed by underground light. The smoke they followed rose from a dozen places, not from a single hearth, and that multiplicity mattered. It signified a collective cartography. The map's lines were the hands that had tended the embers before them. When the plain widened into the hollow of threads, the air thickened with ribbons of mist that stirred like the ends of woven cloth. Each ribbon bore a faint glow, as though someone had sewn a single stitch of flame into fog. These are the paths people leave behind when they choose attention, Alara told them. A stitch of care here, a mending there. The map records such gestures as surely as any river records rains. Lyra reached out with the finger and felt heat that was barely there. Her ember thrummed in answer. The apprentices moved through that weaving slowly. The smoke braided into scenes, hands sharing bread, an old man teaching a child to read letters traced by finger and flower, a woman mending a torn sail while humming a song neither she nor anyone else could remember. The episodes were intimate and small. No battles, no monuments. The map made of smoke refused grandeur. It insisted on tenderness. Each apprentice kept a silent tally, a ledger of smallness, and discovered their astonishment at how enormous those tiny things became. When held in sequence, hours turned into the trial Ilara named the Mirror Grove. Trees there grew with trunks hollowed to rings of light, and the smoke gathered in the hollows and reflected like lenses. Step into a hollow and the smoke would show you a mirror of choice, not a cold glass, but a stage on which your past and your possible selves performed quietly. Do not fear what you see, Elara murmured as they stepped in. The ember will not burn you, it will reveal. Lyra's hollow showed a younger self who had left a field untended in a year of drought, thinking the loss too small to be worth grief. The younger Lyra sat under heatless stars and ate a bread that did not taste like the world. Seeing it, the present Lyra felt both shame and a strange tenderness for the smaller person who had done what could not be done then. She lifted her ember, and the mirror smoke shifted. The younger self stepped forward and accepted a small gift. A walking reed bound with a ribbon. It was not a punishment, it was an instruction to return. The mirror taught her that guilt melts into obligation when one acts from love. Beyond the mirror grove lay a shallow river, glass smooth, with smoke drifting just above its surface, like wayward thoughts. The apprentices had to cross without dampening flame. They learned to hold their breath and step light, using stones that were not stones but exhausted embers, calling for careful passage. One apprentice, Matteo, misjudged and splashed. The ember flared and shuddered, but did not die. He laughed, an embarrassed, grateful sound, and a ripple in the smoke braided itself into a small spiral of forgiveness. The map made space for the clumsy and the repentant. Midday found them at the field of lost lanterns. Here, the smoke pulled in low heaps like fog in forgotten valleys. Lanterns many years old, many hands worn lay half buried in grass. Some had been abandoned because they were weak, others lay because their keepers had died or moved on. Elara lifted one and showed them how to clean residue from its glass, to strike the match with patience. A lantern returned to life hummed, with small bright songs of the lives it had lighted across the years. It was a skill exercise and an ethic lesson. An ember given without teaching can be a wasted gift. Knowledge of tending travels as surely as flame. By evening, they came to the spiral of questions, a wide hollow in the land where smoke rose in stacked rings like the ripples of a dropped pebble, and each ring contained a riddle not of words but of attention. Walk through the inner ring, and you would find a small testing ground, a child by a broken wheel who asked for help, but then ran away when given it, or a woman with a pouch of seeds who appeared to barter a shelter and really bartered a story. The apprentices discovered that the smoke preferred complicity over simple solutions. Every time they did something for someone without teaching them, the ring writhed. Every time they shared an ember and the method to care for it, the ring settled. Night in the plain was not an absence, but a rearrangement. The embers gathered a chorus, each with a timbre, and the smoke above caught their notes and wove them into stars. Lyra lay on her back and watched the sky mirror their small, human constellations, paths that once crossed, nights that once glowingly held hands. Elara sat a while and then began to speak, slowly, as if telling the story of the world. Prometheus stole the first spark to make us answerable, she said, voice low. Light is not merely to banish darkness, it is to bring what is hidden into relationship. You will carry this reminder with you. Every flame you give can illuminate a mind, or it can become a light without a listener. Dawn after that was a silver thing. They rose and passed into the Vale of Echoes, where the smoke kept memory like dry leaves keep scent. Each time they called the ember to show them, it radiated not only heat but a resonance, a tiny music that matched a memory the veil offered. Lyra's ember hummed a soft note that made a smoke figure of a teacher who had taught her to whittle spoons, who had laughed at mistakes. The smoke breathed that lesson back to her, not as a ghost, but as a possibility to be continued. The central trial of the chapter, the crucible of choice, awaited beyond the veil. It was not a pit of flame but a basin of slow, roiling mist. The crucible demanded that each apprentice bring before it one fear and one hope, and hold them both in the same hand until the ember reconciled them. This was not a spectacle, it was intimate work that uncovered whether their care could be generous and fierce at once. Matteo lifted his fear that the ember would teach him to want more than he had, and his hope that tending light could make his cottage safe for his sister. He held them together and, as if in answer, the smoke braided them into a ladder of soft light. Lyra held a memory of the field left to drought and the hope of returning to teach better. The smoke met her with a map stitch, a list of small actions, a season-by-season plan written in the curl of vapor. They emerged from the crucible with scripts and vows small enough to be practiced daily. Teach a neighbor to tie a wick correct. Mend one roof before the rains. Alara watched the apprentices with the satisfaction of someone who has taught many gardeners. You see how the map forms? She asked that evening. Not in straight lines but in commitments. A path etched in smoke is a promise kept until another promise is made. They sat in a ring and wrote in their ledgers not only the routes the smoke had shown, but the obligations each route implied. The map had become a ledger of lives, inked by breath. A storm came the third day. It was not the furious, theatrical weather of old tales, but a patient rolling sky that soaked what was brittle and coaxed root systems awake. Rain blew the smoke into new shapes, more urgent now, as if the map itself had to reconfigure to survive. Alara taught them how to wrap embers in oiled cloth and carry them beneath the skin of a jacket, how to breathe into a valley jar to keep flame from starving, and how to accept that even the most careful tending could fail. When the rain beat out an ember, it was not a doom but a reset. They learned to accept repair without shame. The map drew rivers where it needed to and asked for mending. After rain came a procession of strangers. Word of the embers and the map had spread in small waves. A midwife from a town 2 valleys over, a mason who wanted to learn how not to collapse when bad weather came, a teacher who had never known why tales matter. They arrived muddy and polite, and Alara met them with the habit of passing on not the ember, but the method of passing it. She made a small school by the pond where the embers were not always lit. Often they taught with a dry wick, teaching touch first. The strangers left with seeds of knowledge, threaded ribbons, and, occasionally, a small ember if their promise to learn was true. The map widened. The smoke braided outward. Weeks flowed like this in subtle arcs. There were small scenes of human life that the apprentices recorded even when no one asked. A boy who learned to fix a splintered oar and then stayed to teach his father how to breathe the ember steady while rowing. A woman who had been hoarding warmth for fear of scarcity, who clasped the reed and let the flame pass to a child who had never known a safe night. The apprentice's ledger thickened, obligations, payments made in bread and watchful hours, names like beads threaded on a string. One night, under a moon so thin it was almost a memory, the map's smoke rose into a form that none of them had seen, a figure with hands cupped, offering an ember not upward, but outward. Lyra felt a sudden clarity. Prometheus, she realized, is less an outlaw and more a husband to attention, someone who trusted that light belongs in common hands. Alara had said this before, but now the phrase had weight. The apprentices were not simply learners but stewards. This shift altered how they spoke, how they promised, how they made plans. Stewardship is neither possession nor servitude. It is an active form of care. Then came the labyrinth of questions, the chapter's largest trial, an expanse where smoke built corridors that opened only when someone asked a real question and closed when someone answered too quickly. The labyrinth prized curiosity that was patient and answers that were generous. Lyra asked, in the softest voice she could manage, "What if I am not enough?" The corridor hummed like a drum and threw up an image of many hands passing a single ember. The map replied with what the labyrinth wanted most, not self-justification, but a willingness to carry pieces of the work. The corridor opened wider. In the labyrinth, they learned another critical task, the difference between giving light and giving deliverance. The two can look the same. Giving light with instruction corrects illiteracy of care. Giving deliverance is to take away the chance someone else has to learn. Matteo, who had once been tempted to hoard his ember for his family's sake, practiced sharing and teaching, and the labyrinth rewarded him with a small smoke lantern that would guide travelers on foggy nights. The lesson glittered: generosity that teaches multiplies. The map. The labyrinth center was the hearth, a place memory had warmed so often the stones remembered thumbprints. Here, the smoke was dense and slow, like a language learning to say something very old. Alara asked each apprentice to place their ember on the central stone and to speak for a minute about what they would do when they left the plane. There were stumbles, sudden laughs, tears that were neither humiliation nor triumph, but honest counting. Lyra promised to teach a single child to tend an ember as a part of cleaning the schoolroom. Matteo promised to teach his sister to read by the lamp. Others promised patchworks of commitments small enough to be kept. The smoke took their promises and braided them into a crown of faint light. "We cannot make the world safe," Alara said, "but we can make the small places in it more livable." That is how maps of smoke become continents of care. The apprentices understood they were being inducted into a line of people who had made similar promises in the past, a genealogy not of blood but of passing on. The final trial was not a spectacular challenge. It was quiet and ordinary in the best way. They had to leave. The map had to remain alive even after they were gone, which meant they must hand the reed and the small ledgers to someone else, teach at least one committed neighbor, and walk away. Letting go was harder than any riddle. Lyra bound a ribbon around her reed, knotted it once, and with trembling hands set it into the palm of a young woman from the nearby hamlet. The woman's eyes filled with a mix of delight and terror. "I will learn," she promised. Lyra walked away and felt as if a small limb had been severed and replanted in better soil. They traveled the last mile in companionable silence. The map they carried was heavy, not with physical weight, but with the sense of accumulated practice. Smoke rose from hedges like bookmarks. Little lit stones marked where lessons had been given. As the valley opened and the roofs came into view, Alara stopped and turned to them. Her face had the light of someone who has seen the right thing happen slowly. "This was never about a single hero," she said. "Fire's story is a chorus." She smiled, and the apprentices laughed. With wet eyes, Lyra thought of Prometheus and of how stories compress complexity into a single figure. Prometheus stole flame. She realized the theft is only half the tale. The other half is the never-ending work after the taking: teaching, mending, returning, and listening. The map of smoke was less a map of routes than a ledger of obligations kept. The last ember they had passed between them was not a prize, but a contract. That night, the village gathered around a long, low table. Someone had baked a loaf heavy with seeds, and another had brought a pot of stew that smelled like summer. The apprentices set their embers in small cups of sand along the table's length. Children who had watched from the edges came and cupped their hands and were told, with gentle patience, how to do it. The elders recited small rules in low tones. Do not demand the flame to answer questions it was not made to answer. Do not hide it for fear. Teach someone when you can. Ask for help when you cannot. The rules were not commandments so much as curative habits. Lyra felt the ember in her cup pulse like a heartbeat. She took a bread, split it, and gave it to the young woman she had taught that morning. "For your hands," she said. The woman's fingers were calloused and gentle. She nodded. Around the table, the smoke curled like a shared breath. The map had spread its lines further, not only through the plain but along hands that would hold, teach, and pass the ember again. Days became months. The apprentices returned to their homes with small lists of things to be mended: a roof to patch before winter, a reed bridge to teach across, an apprentice to be found and guided. Wherever they traveled, they left knotted ribbons, sewn pouches of wick, and notes on how the embers liked to be held. The smoke that formed the map persisted in traces: a lane lit at dusk where children practiced reading by small flame, a pond where elders met once a week to exchange methods of mending reeds. The map had become a topology of attention. Seasons changed. Winter folded like a slow hand, and the embers slept wrapped in cloth. Spring returned with the cautious, green hand. New apprentices came with the same questions and some of the same small panics. Lyra met them and taught them to cup the flame until their fingers learned patience. She told them of the spiral of reflections and the bridge of choices, but she told it as one might teach a lesson in how to hold a spoon, slowly, with demonstrations and with the admission that one must practice. Years later, when Lyra and Matteo and others sat older under a tree near the pond and a child asked, "Where did you learn all this?" They would smile and point to no single place. "We followed a map drawn in smoke," Lyra would say, and the child would think of breath, of warmth in hands, of the way a light makes small things visible. The story traveled like a migrating ember, folded into pockets, sewn into hems, whispered in dark kitchens. Prometheus' silhouette in the smoke had long since unstuck itself from the first telling. It had bent and multiplied into many shapes. A midwife's hands, a mason's hammer, Eacher's reed. The theft of fire was no longer the myth center. The center had moved to the ledger of what was done after the stealing. That ledger was thick with small entries. 1 lantern repaired, 2 children taught to stitch wicks, 3 knights kept watch during a fever, a year when the mill ran gently because someone had taught how to tend the flame that fed the engines. The map drawn in smoke had become civilization's slow seam, and so chapter 15 closes not with a triumphant banner nor a single lesson engraved on stone, but with the ordinary profundity of hands learning to hold what matters. The apprentices became keepers. Some moved on, some stayed. Ribbons frayed and were retied. Reflections turned into obligations, obligations into habits, habits into the texture of lives that could be passed down like loaves. If a reader will step into this valley later, when smoke has braided into mended bridges and quiet schools, they might still see faint threads of indigo in the dust, the last memory of the map. If they know how to cup, how to teach, how to ask the right questions, they could read those lines. They would learn that a map drawn in smoke does not point to treasure, but to care, and that Prometheus' gift is not merely a thing stolen in an old story, but the daily, tender work of keeping light so that others may learn to find their way. They would tell that the plane kept teaching long after the apprentices had left it, because smoke is patient in ways that memory often is not. The map it drew was never a single outline, accrued like lichen on rock, layer upon slow layer of attention. The apprentices discovered, as months turned into seasons, that the work of tending a flame pulled at the edges of everything. How one mended a boot, how one apologized, how one decided whose turn it was to keep the night watch. The ember's lesson radiated into the ordinary arcs of life. After the labyrinth, the group did not scatter at once. For a while they stayed together, traveling the lesser roads as a loose caravan, showing others how to cup, how to breathe, how to wrap a reed so the heat would travel but the wick would not choke. They taught not by sermon but by doing. In a hamlet that had forgotten the rhythm of shared work, they repaired a communal oven. It was a small miracle. Stones reset, mortar coaxed, and then the oven warmed. When the first flatbreads came out, the women who had watched the apprentices for days clapped silently, not for spectacle, but because something that had been cracked was now whole. The ember had taught them to mend. At a riverside village, a widow accepted an ember and refused to accept instruction alone. She insisted that the apprentices stay and teach the children who had only ever known the flash of strangers' lanterns and the emptiness that follows spectacle. The apprentices set up lessons: how to feed a small flame with shavings, how to know when it is drowning, how to pass it without fear. The children learned to tie wicks and to braid thin reeds. They learned to listen to the quiet breath of a flame the way one learns to hear the tide. There were failures. An apprentice once borrowed a borrowed ember and, in his eagerness, left it too long in a shallow cup by a window during a wet night. The wick grew moldy. The ember choked. He arrived the next morning with a face like someone who had broken a promise. The village gathered. They did not scold him. They sat with him and mended the wick, taught him to dry the fibers safely, to find the patience in the hands that had shaken. The ember returned to life. The lesson lingered. Tending is practice, and mistakes are the raw material of craft. In towns where guilds kept careful books for every transaction, the map drawers were at first suspicious. What was a promise written in smoke beside a sign? Receipt? But the apprentices learned to speak both languages, ledger and breath. They taught carpenters to keep a record of not only hours, but of who had shown them a knot, of who had lent a tool, and how it had been returned. The map began to fold into systems, small, human systems that resisted being swallowed whole by profit. It was not an overthrow but a slow grafting. Lantern-keeping classes at the guild hall, Evenings where masons taught apprentices how to trust a mortar's mood. Sometimes, the smoke did strange things. In a high city, the embers rose and met the glow of many lamps, and did not diminish. Instead, the smallest lights found chinks between the official illuminations. A street of lantern makers adopted the oath and made a rule. Anyone who took a lantern for a season had to teach one neighbor how to tend it. Over years, the rule changed the neighborhood. Repairs were shared, flares were rare, and children learned the sound of a well-tended wick. The map, invisible but felt, had come to city stone. They sang little songs to remember technique. One verse half lullaby, half instruction passed quickly from mouth to mouth. Breathe the ember like a sleeping thing. Lift its chin, do not choke. Teach the small hand how to bring a reed alive with gentle strokes. The songs were practical memory aids. They spread faster than any law. Wider storms arrived, as they always do in slow worlds. A drought 2 summers on left wells low. The embers taught parched farmers to ration light and labor. There were nights when embers moved from house to house. Not because of ritual, but because someone's child had a fever, and the night needed more eyes. The map learned these roots and remembered them. The reed-bound ledger kept entries like small prayers. Light at Milo's porch, 3 nights. Watch kept by Anna. The ledger's modest rows replaced the grand accounts that once thought to buy care with coin. The apprentices changed too. Lyra's hands grew calloused in the deliberate places, fingertips hardened not by toil, but by the habit of touch. Her temper softened because she had learned that attention tends people as surely as it tends flame. Matteo, who had once been quick with jokes to hide worry, learned to sit with someone through a night's watch without filling the silence with words. They altered their gait, the way they carried a pack, the rhythm of their speech. The ember had made a map of their bodies. A tea harvest, they returned briefly to the plain, not to relive tests, but to add a stitch. The smoke welcomed them like a river accepts tributaries. They each walked the place where the spiral once rose, and spoke aloud the small promises each had kept. Promises were not recited like vows, but catalogued like seeds. I will teach Greta to plait a wick. I will fix the mill's spare axle before winter. The smoke that rose listened in a language of folds and curls, and then braided their words into new paths. The last ember's oath, which had started as a sentence in a reed-bound note, grew into a long paragraph of practice. To tend with hands and with time. To teach without hoarding. To bring fire as question rather than answer. To accept repair as proof of life. To pass without possessiveness. People took it into their mouths and into their stitches. It became ordinary law. Children heard the oath in play when they would cup a tiny coal and whisper, "I will lend it," as if promising to grow. Not all neighbors agreed. Some preferred the old brash lights, brighter, easier, mechanically sure. They mocked the slow rituals of ember care as quaint. Groups of those who favored fast brightness did not vanish. They thrived in their way. The apprentices learned to make no enemies of speed. They learned to show where slow light endured longer, to demonstrate utility rather than moralize. Often the skeptical ones would come back to ask how a flame had kept a roof from caving because its watch had heard the first creak. The map was practical, and the practical persuaded. Years opened like an album. Some apprentices never returned to the plain. They started families, opened small schools, taught midwives, or kept nights at the mills. Others walked still, carrying their embers to islands and mountain hamlets. Where they walked, a ribbon of listening followed. Small festivals appeared, not of spectacle but of work. A communal day to mend nets. A dawn when everyone cleaned their wicks and taught a child the feel of a good string. The map's lines were not printed routes but offered invitations. Alara aged the way an oak does slowly, in the grain and in the turn of her shoulders. She began to come less often to the caravans and more often to the pond where the world had once started teaching her. She loved that the apprentices dispersed, that their embers made small constellations across the landscape. She would sit and listen as others described how a careful passing had prevented a feud from hardening, how a taut hand had saved a life in harvest, how a repaired lantern had kept a widow from stumbling in the dark. Prometheus's legend, she thought, had always been half a story. The other half was what people did every day afterward. One autumn, thin light, leaves like old coins, Lyra returned from a distant village with a child on her knee, a small reed bundle, and a promise. She had learned, she had taught, and in the county where she had been apprenticed, someone had finally made a ledger of the embers. Who had won, who taught whom, which paths were usual in winter. They had folded the map into a calendar. That was a modest triumph. Attention turned into infrastructure, but the infrastructure remained tender. On a cool evening some years later, the apprentices, older now, voices lined, sleeves patch gathered, around a low fire in the village square. They placed embers in small clay cups and set them as if offering a constellation to the children clustering about. One by one, they spoke a short line. It was no proclamation but memory made human. I taught a child to hold the reed. I kept the watch at the mill. I mended 3 roofs. They spoke like midwives reciting births, names, and small facts, each a life stitched to a flame. Ilara's voice came last, low and sure. We were thieves once, only in stories, she said, but the true theft is made right by the giving. That follows. Prometheus gave a spark, and we turned it into a school. We have learned to make sure that light never becomes a thing kept from hands that need it. The map we carry is not lines on paper, it is labor given and returned. She cupped her ember and passed it into the hands of a child who looked like a younger version of everyone present. The child took it solemnly, learning at once that the ember weighs more in responsibility than in warmth. At the edge of the square a child asked, "Will the map stay after we are gone?" The apprentices looked at one another and laughed softly. Matteo answered, "It always will. Enough people make the map with their hands. Smoke forgets the exact words, but it keeps the shape of what was learned." The map continued to grow. After they were dead, threads frayed, new paths were woven. A generation would teach another how to tie a reed, and the knot would differ slightly, better suited to a new kind of wind. The map adapted, but the central contour remained. Small kindnesses multiplied. When they set out this time, they traveled light in the practical ways. Thin packs, spare wicks, a reed each with knots that meant who had taught them. But their lightness was also moral. They had learned to leave room for others' embers, to make the carriage of flame a communal choreography rather than a solitary devotion. The first village they reached had a clock tower that no one wound anymore, and a gable roof threaded with holes. The children there ran in circuits all day, their laughter brittle with too much unsatisfied expectation. Lyra taught one of the boys to cup a wick until he learned to breathe with it. He steadied into a kind of wonder. Then the elders asked for more than the flame. They asked for a way of keeping the town's ordinary hours safely lit without burning oil money or neighborly patience. The apprentices made a plan, a roster of evening keepers, a shared box of wicks, and a ladder with instructions on how to clean lenses. The map, once only smoke, took on commitments written in ledger and in the rhythm of watch cycles. Practicality became ritual. Farther afield, on a slope where the wind always had the last word, the apprentices encountered a community that had for years been living on borrowed light. Large, bright lamps that were tended by salaried men who charged a price for their glow. The lamps were perfect at a distance, but rough on intimacy. People had stopped learning how to mend their own lamps because the service was easier to buy. The apprentices started slowly. One small demonstration about wicking, one night of shared mending, then an apprenticeship of 2 weeks for a baker who wanted to learn before he taught his customers to bake by reliable light. He returned to his shop with hands that smelled of flour and oil, and began to teach his children to knead under a low ember rather than a hired brazier's glare. The map widened in this place not by replacing the big lights, but by inserting fragile habits into the seams between market and home. Word of a new practice is a soft current. It does not roar. Yet across valleys, the current had become a river of request. People asked not for embers alone, but for instruction in passing them. How to make a sleeve of oiled cloth that breathed. How to fashion a reed that would not clog in humid weather, when to feed a small flame with dry straw, and when to let it rest. The apprentices wrote their teachings down in a new kind of ledger, not the brittle list of money, and crop yields, but a manual of attention. They called it the common folio and bound it with reed thread. Recipes for damp wick recovery, songs to steady fingers on long night watches, a set of tiny diagrams for mending a cracked chimney. The folio traveled like a pamphlet and was taught in kitchens and schoolrooms. It was not doctrine, it was a craft. They discovered, too, how the ember could be misunderstood. In one coastal town, a well-meaning keeper had shown off his ember at a festival, and in a moment meant to charm, he had treated it like a lamp that must never be touched without permission. The community responded by treating the ember as an object of status. The ember's bearer sat in special seats and was asked to grant favors. The apprentices had to undo this habit with patience. They returned to the town and taught the simple ritual again: how to request an ember, how to promise to learn, how to pass it on when the lesson had been absorbed. Ceremony is a poor substitute for teaching. Over months, by teaching the ritual of passing rather than the spectacle of display, it earned back the ember's original function, a teacher that refused to be an idol. Not all of their work was small and domestic. Sometimes the flame illuminated social architectures. In a market that had become noisy and fractious, they proposed a new market watch, not a guard to find wrongdoers, but a circle of keepers who would hold embers at the stalls where arguments began and offer time and a listening ear. The experiment was not immediately triumphant. People bristled at being asked to stop and breathe, but slowly, month by month, the market's petty exchanges cooled. A custom took shape. When two merchants argued, one might say, "Let us take the ember," and both would step aside into the soft light. The ember did not solve disputes by decree, but it made space for dialogue. The map had thus become a social instrument, redrawing how people paused. The apprentice's biggest challenge, however, came when a new technology arrived: a glass chimney that magnified any small flame into dazzling light. It was a wondrous thing, and for a while, it seemed to offer the very answers the apprentices could only promise: brighter, longer, cleaner light. Many welcomed the chimney with open hands. The apprentices did not object to invention. What they worried about was learning's atrophy. If light could be had without learning, what would become of the habits that had made villages resilient? They experimented. They accepted the glass chimneys into a few places with the covenant. The chimney would be used in the mill and the infirmary, and in return, the chimney bearer would sponsor a circle of learning where 6 people a month would be taught to tend embers and record their teaching in the common folio. The balance held, because the chimney's owner saw that the social fabric was a necessity as much as mechanized light was convenience. The map had not been bypassed. It had been negotiated. Season after season, the apprentices watched how the ember's presence altered grief and joy. They arrived in a town where the old bell tower had fallen silent because no one could climb to ring it. No one missed the bell at first until there was a death, and then suddenly missing its voice was like absence you can't name. The apprentices taught a small ring of neighbors to keep a slow watch by the tower for a week, 3 at a time. Pairs trading dawn for dusk, carrying embers and, in candlelight, marking each name. The watch became a weekly practice, and the tower's sound returned not only as a signal, but as a ritual reminding people that someone, somewhere, was tending life's quiet demands. The map's lines, once theoretical, threaded through funeral practice and festival and repairs. Some stories the apprentices could not fix. A winter came that was sharp in a way the elders had not seen for a generation. An ember choked in the hands of someone whose house had let in wind at the seams. They lost the small flame despite every practice being observed. The community gathered, wrapped the wick, learned new ways to stoke from smother, and told the story not as an accusation, but as a mark in the ledger. Here is a place we must mend. Loss, they learned, was not the enemy of the map. It was the map's weather. It called for repair, for new commitments, for renewed teaching. In the months after that winter, they devised a cold watch practice. If embers looked weak in the deep months, neighbors would rotate watches so that no ember had to be trusted to a single pair of hands. The map adapted again, stitching in redundancies. Years made apprentices into elders. They returned to the plane sometimes, not to ray past trials, but to leave notes in the smoke, small phrases made of breath that would show later travelers who had stitched a certain bridge or planted a certain seed. The plane accepted these traces. New spirals would rise, and a small wisp might spell out a name in a language of curl and pause. It became a cemetery of attention, not only where people were buried, but where people had kept promises. Children learned to read the smoke with the finger across the air, like reading a tide. There were festivals too, that grew without grand design. The Feast of Little Lights began as a village custom in a place where children had first learned to hold an ember. Once a year, families would set out tiny cups of sand with 100 small embers at dusk and walk through the lanes sharing bread. Each ember would be passed to a neighbor who promised to teach someone the following week. The festival was less about the spectacle of many lights and more about the relay of instruction. It became a living archive. One could trace a line of teaching by the ribbons tied to gateposts and the notes stuck into reed sheaths. Lyra herself returned, in time, to the mirror grove where the smoke had first offered her a younger self. She walked slowly, touching the hollows and listening for the whisper of the past. She taught, as she had been taught, but now with the softer insistence that only time affords. Teach someone and promise to return. She kept a small list folded in her palm, names in a child's hand, now adult, and tending others. When a child asked why she insisted on returning, she answered simply, because otherwise the map might forget us. The child laughed, thinking, maps remembered forever, and Lyra only smiled. She had learned to trust the smoke's patience, but not its memory. Old teachers die, old embers cool, yet what the apprentices had become was not bound to the warmth of a single flame. They had sown practices like buried seeds. Even when an ember went cold in one home, its method had been taught in 3 others. The map had become institutional in the softest possible way. Not a bureaucracy but a lattice of reciprocities, neighbors who checked on wicks monthly, markets that scheduled teaching hours, a midwife's circle that kept 2 embers lit through long deliveries. People began to refer to this as the network of gentle fires, which sounded grander than any of its constituent parts. It was accurate, for the network was a net.